Hello, it is Monday, and we are off. I'm very excited to have one of my favorite leaders, friends, guests, the president of the Florida Education Association, Andrew Spar, joins me today, and our conversation begins at 27 minutes. But there, of course, is a cavalcade of news across the weekend. Lots of headlines and sound coming your way, and I'll probably call an audible at the line. That's a sports. It's a football thing, you know, but if the VP is announced on Monday, which I think it might be, if not Tuesday, I probably will host at least an hour-long hangout the night that it's announced. So look for that announcement if you are a paid subscriber to this here podcast. And if you're not, what are you waiting for? Patreon.com/Pete Dominic right now. I hope you saw and maybe even already listened to my conversation with Mara Quint, which I posted yesterday. A little Sunday chat with Mara Quint, which was great. We covered a lot, including some of the stories coming out about the Olympics. And I do want to apologize to anybody who was offended at the hangout on Thursday night by my criticism of the Olympics and lack of interest in it. I feel bad about it now because I realize I'm for unity. I like the idea that countries from all over the world are meeting and competing in athletic events. And what am I doing sitting out? So I paid a lot more attention to the Olympics, and I feel very badly for shitting on it. And I tuned in right in time to see that pole vaulter hit the bar with his dick, which I thought was one of the greatest things that I've ever seen in my life. And I watched it 5,000 times. This isn't obviously a sports or sports-related show as much as I love sports, but, you know, a lot of these cultural stories and controversies coming out of it, just the fact that it brings a lot of people together. I can get into that, and I can certainly talk about it as well, when and if it comes up. But now it's time to get to all of the headlines from the weekend. Oh, and by the way, I, of course, warmed up the audience at Last Week Tonight, the taping at HBO on Saturday, and the show was about RFK Jr., but the show taped before we found out that RFK Jr. one time left a bear in Central Park and made it look like it was killed by a cyclist. We learned that yesterday. One of the crazier things that made your brain break when you heard it, but Last Week Tonight taped a whole amazing show about RFK Jr., and it was before that news came out. So I just had to mention that because what a tough break. Still a great episode. I hope you watch it. All right, here are your headlines. In the Olympics, by the way, the U.S. overtook China for the Olympic medal lead. The ratings are soaring for Comcast. World records are tumbling, and that is one of the big stories around the world. Obviously, coming back here home, the Democratic National Convention just 2 weeks away. Wanted to mention that. Tropical storm Debbie is expected to strengthen into a hurricane overnight, making landfall in Florida's Big Bend region on sunrise Monday morning. That is today, the 5th of August. This is Sunday. Hurricane force winds of 74 to 95 miles an hour are forecast in areas under hurricane warning in the Big Bend region. The majority of Florida's west coast is under a tropical storm warning, and I'm thinking of all of our listeners and friends down there in Florida. I hope you can check in and let us know that you are right on the Discord platform or somewhere else. Let's go to international news. I got 3 stories for you. First, from Venezuela, the humiliated and now furious Nicolas Maduro has locked up 2,000 Venezuelans in his fiercest crackdown of his rule over the controversy regarding his, quote, re-election. In the UK over the past few days, they've been battered by widespread riots led by hundreds of far-right protesters. The violent rallies began Tuesday night following this deadly stabbing that killed 3 young girls and wounded several others at a children's dance and yoga class in northwest England. The attack had triggered Islamophobic and anti-immigration sentiments in the UK, leading to hundreds of arrests, dozens of officers injured, and multiple buildings damaged, including a mosque and a hotel known to have housed asylum seekers. The riots entered a 6th day on Sunday, showed no signs of waning. Of course, the attacker was born in England. He's a citizen, and so there's been a lot of disinformation. The new prime minister blaming it on far-right protesters and say we're not having it anymore, so they're trying to quell them. And let's now head over to Bangladesh, where nearly 100 people were killed. Hundreds more injured yesterday as renewed anti-government protests swept across the country, with protesters calling for the prime minister to resign, and the prime minister accusing them of sabotage, cutting off the mobile internet in a bid to quell the unrest. Country's leading Bengali language daily newspaper said at least 95 people, including at least 14 police officers, died in the violence. News in the Middle East conflict. Israel and Hezbollah said they had fired at targets in each other's territory. Hezbollah said it had launched dozens of rockets in northern Israel. Israel said it had responded by hitting the launch site. 2 Israeli airstrikes hit a town in the occupied West Bank. Hamas said that the strikes killed 3 members of its military wing and 6 other fighters. The U.S. is sending more combat aircraft and warships to the Middle East after Iran and its proxies threatened revenge against Israel for the killing of a top Hamas leader, Ismail Haniyeh. His death has increased tensions between the president of the United States, President Biden, and the Israeli Prime Minister. Biden said that the killing has thrown ceasefire talks into doubt. Netanyahu, of course, rejects that idea. That's a quick update on the Middle East, which continues to be a real scary situation and terrible for so many people. Over the weekend, the disgraced former president spoke in Atlanta. Didn't get as many people in the same venue in Georgia State University where Eric Siegel works. He wasn't there, of course. As Kamala Harris got, she had a lot more people in that same venue, but a lot of people were talking about that. In his speech, listen to this rundown. I won't obviously play clips for you, rarely do that, but he congratulated Putin on the prisoner swap. That's right. He did his bit discussing his friend, the late, great Hannibal Lecter. He attacked Bruce Springsteen. He attacked the Republican governor of Georgia, who Republicans like there, Brian Kemp. He made repeatedly overly racist statements about Vice President Kamala Harris. Attacked the school that hosted the event because the crowd was not as big as Harris's event. He said, quote, "I don't have a guitar. I don't have a guitar. I don't have a guitar." At one point, when he was referring to Bruce Springsteen, he attacked Republicans Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan. He intentionally mispronounced VP Harris's name and said there are 19 different ways to say it. He said he now supports electric vehicles, which he didn't 2 weeks ago because Elon Musk endorsed him. And he had all kinds of really weird kind of cognitive glitches where he slurred words and so on. But that's just a quick rundown I saw online. But Politico Playbook writes this about Trump, that he's veering off script lately. His campaign may be running a much tighter, smoother operation this time around, but the candidate himself still can't help himself. His baseless attacks on Harris's race have damaged his team's plan to take on and define her. According to Wall Street Journal, his controversies are putting Senate Republicans back in the familiar, uncomfortable position of being made to answer for him. Washington Post writes, Trump is continuing to pick off-topic or off-the-cuff fights. He doubled down on his refusal to attend the ABC debate with Kamala Harris, instead declaring that he would refuse to debate her unless she agreed to his Fox News proposal. Trump also issued a string of Truth Social posts that derided Harris as too low IQ and dumb to debate him. Yesterday, before and during the rally, I mentioned he reignited this feud with Governor Brian Kemp. He repeated baseless claims that Democratic political attacks were a blame for the assassination attempt against him, despite the fact that the attempted assassin's motive remains unclear. So that is just a little bit of analysis from actually several different news sources that Politico had aggregated for their Playbook newsletter. The latest from Judge Tanya Chutkan. Headline, Judge rejects Trump's claim of vindictive prosecution by Biden allies. In a 16-page opinion, Judge Chutkan swept aside Trump's attempt to dismiss his Washington, D.C. criminal case over claims that President Joe Biden pressured prosecutors to target his political rival. In the ruling, Judge Chutkan said Trump repeatedly mischaracterized the charges against him, which described far more simply criminalizing his claimed belief that the 2020 election was stolen. Rather, Chutkan ruled the charges described a sweeping attempt to manipulate and lie to government authorities in order to undermine the lawful 2020 election results. So that's the latest from the January 6th criminal case against Trump and Judge Chutkan's ruling on it. Well, the Harris campaign was hit with its first kind of personal, it's not a scandal, but the Daily Mail, which is a British right-wing gossip rag, said that Doug Emhoff, Kamala Harris's husband, of course, the second gentleman, apparently had cheated on his first wife, Kirsten, with their kid's teacher. And it helped, nanny and teacher, apparently, and it apparently helped contribute to the end of the marriage. They also reported that Emhoff got her pregnant, but that she didn't keep the baby. So in response, Doug Emhoff issued a statement to CNN acknowledging that his first marriage, quote, went through some tough times on account of my actions. I took responsibility in the years since. We worked through things as a family and have become out stronger on the other side. He reports that all the drama predates Harris and has long been known to the Biden and Harris teams. And Kirsten Emhoff stood up for the family in a statement, too, saying that Doug and I decided to end our marriage for a variety of reasons many years ago. He's a great father to our kids and continues to be a great friend to me. And, of course, she likes Kamala Harris. They have a great relationship, and so I don't know that that's really going to get any pickup or go anywhere, especially because Donald Trump cheated on everyone, always. Not only his wives, but everybody that he ever did anything with or had any kind of deal with. So there you go. And here at the end of the headlines, I just want to mention this report by the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy. This is this left-leaning nonprofit think tank. I trust their work, and I've interviewed people from their organization in the past. But The Gothamist wrote an article about the study. The headline is, Undocumented Immigrant Workers in New York Pay Over $3 billion in taxes, according to this report. So if this is even close to right, and undocumented people are paying $3 billion in taxes in just New York, imagine what they're paying across the country. Let me just read the first part of it for you. Immigrants without legal authorization to work paid $3.1 billion in state and local taxes in New York in 2022, according to this new report. The sum includes sales, property, and income taxes for an estimated 676,000 immigrant New Yorkers who lack citizenship or legal residency status. If the workers were granted work permits, their tax contributions would rise to nearly $4 billion, this study found. New York is home to the fourth largest concentration of undocumented immigrants in the country, behind California, Texas, and Florida, according to the study. And that group, it doesn't even include asylum seekers who are here working and paying taxes. Of course, the results counter common myths about immigrants not paying taxes and underscore the link between the country's immigration policies and government tax coffers. They also highlight immigrant laborers' economic contributions as national polls show waning support for immigration. Really important study. I wanted to mention this piece, and The Gothamist is where I saw it. I shared it yesterday on Twitter if you want to find it. I've been following the immigration debate and policy for a really long time, and so I get pretty worked up and fired up about this issue, which is why I'm really happy to play Senator John Ossoff, who I don't know when he said this. I think this is in the past week or so, but I thought this was just so dead on, the way that he articulated what had happened with immigration reform most recently when the Republicans killed it. So I want to start there with the sound bites for you right now. Here he is, Senator John Ossoff of Georgia.
No one, and I mean no one, is interested in or takes seriously lectures on border security from Senate Republicans. No one. In one of the most stunning acts of political cowardice in recent American history, a bipartisan border security bill co-authored by a conservative Republican member of this committee was put forward in the U.S. Senate. It would have tightened asylum standards to stop exploitation of the asylum system. It would have surged enforcement resources to the border. It would have meant more expedited removals of those who enter this country unlawfully. It would have empowered the federal government to take the fight to the drug cartels who are laying waste to communities across our country with fentanyl. A bipartisan border security bill co-authored by a conservative Republican member of this committee. And it wasn't just voted down by Senate Republicans, it was denied even a debate on the floor of the United States Senate. Because the former president of the United States, and he said this publicly, thought it wasn't in his political interest for the nation to be served. It wasn't in his political interest for a bipartisan border security bill to be enacted by Congress. The American people are smart. So all of the performative chest pounding today on border security is utterly disingenuous. When Senate Republicans abrogated their basic governing responsibility and refused even to let us debate and amend that bipartisan border security proposal. The American people see that and understand that.
Well, I don't think that the American people do see and understand that, not enough of them, but I loved everything that Senator John Ossoff just said there. Of course, when it comes to border security and immigration policy, Republicans, they would just rather have the problem than solve the problem. They don't want to actually solve the problem. They just want the appearance of a crisis so they continue to scare you and try to get you to vote for them. And, of course, the right-wing media and the rest often goes along with it to create the appearance of intransigence that Democrats don't do anything, but they've been trying to do something and pass a bill since President Obama and long before, but since 2013 when Republicans last voted down their own bill. All right, let's head over to the world of conspiracies and right-wing villainry. It is the cartoon villain Maria Bartiromo with cartoon villain J.D. Vance. She had J.D. Vance on her CNBC show, and she pushed him a little bit and asked him about why he's not so popular or something. Well, here it is. It was kind of fun.
You've got a lot of people talking about you on both the Democrat side and the Republican side. You've heard the chatter. They're saying, some people are saying you were the wrong pick for Trump's running mate. What are you doing about it?
Well, Maria, all I can do is go out there and prosecute the case against Kamala Harris and remind people that things were more prosperous and more peaceful when Donald Trump was president. Look, I recognize that there are a lot of folks, even in the GOP establishment, and certainly on the far left, who don't like the fact that Donald Trump picked me. I actually take their criticism as a badge of honor. Of course, the media is going to attack the people they fear the most. The media is going to attack the people I think who can most effectively bring President Trump's message to a broader swath of the electorate. And I don't come from inside the Beltway, Maria. You know, I grew up as a poor kid. I didn't come from a political family or a wealthy family. I worked my way through college, through the Marine Corps, and eventually landed as Donald Trump's running mate. I think that's a story that a lot of normal Americans can empathize with. I'm not shocked that a lot of inside the Beltway media types don't like me, but their policies are the problem. Of course they don't like me because we're running to fix what they have broken.
Fair enough. And I guess the Democrats see all of that as weird.
Yeah, they do. We do. That's right. Okay. Now, speaking of responses to J.D. Vance, so over on CBS 60 Minutes, they had an excerpt on CBS Sunday Morning, which I enjoyed, this 9-minute interview. I watched the whole thing between Leslie Stahl and Nancy Pelosi, and Leslie Stahl quickly asked Nancy Pelosi about J.D. Vance.
Did Donald Trump make a mistake when he chose J.D. Vance?
Oh, I think it was a great choice.
Oh, I really love that. That was a lot of fun. Leslie Stahl also asked Nancy Pelosi about her advice for Kamala Harris on how to win.
So what is your bit of advice for Kamala Harris on how to run this campaign against Donald Trump? Does she instigate a fight? Does she bait him?
Let me just say this, and this is what I tell everybody all the time. Just be yourself. It's the same advice I give to women. Be yourself.
Okay, be yourself. Good enough. We'll take it. I mean, women should take it. I mean, let me move on. And what I want to move on to is some interesting analysis from Chris Christie, who was on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, who had this to say about how Trump screwed up when he endorsed Doug Mastriano for Pennsylvania governor. That guy was like a QAnon conspiracy theorist, right-wing extremist, which helped Josh Shapiro win.
This is really important. And I'll tell you this, if she picked Shapiro on Tuesday, Donald Trump created Josh Shapiro.
How so?
He endorsed Mastriano, the weakest Republican candidate in that field. What it allowed Josh Shapiro to do was, instead of playing to his base to try to win a narrow election, he saw an opportunity for a coalition-building election, and that's what he did. So now he's seen as a coalition builder because he did it, but the only reason he could do it is because Trump made another ridiculously stupid endorsement by endorsing Mastriano, who was a flawed, weak, bad candidate. If Josh Shapiro winds up winning and Trump loses Pennsylvania, he can go back to his decision in 2022 as planting the seeds for that loss.
All right. I thought that was pretty interesting analysis from Chris Christie, so I wanted to include that. Now, here is the second gentleman, maybe the first gentleman soon enough. It's Doug Emhoff. This is Kamala Harris's husband. He's been doing a lot of interviews, and he was on MSNBC with Jonathan Capehart yesterday, where they were talking about man stuff.
Let's talk about masculinity for a moment. Has being second gentleman changed your own view of perceived gender roles or what it means to be a man?
This is something I've thought about a lot and something I've spoken about a lot. There's too much of toxicity, masculine toxicity out there, and we've kind of confused what it means to be a man, what it means to be masculine, where you've got this trope out there that you've got to be tough and, angry and lash out to be strong. It's just the opposite. Strength is how you show your love for people. Strength is how you are for people and how you have their back and how you stick up for other people and pushing out against bullies. I mean, that's what I believe it is. So every time can speak against this toxicity. We're seeing it with our younger people. We're seeing it in our discourse, in our politics, in the media. You're seeing it as it relates to so many of the issues that we're pushing back on. So I think it's a problem, and I'm going to continue to use this platform every time I get to speak out against this toxic masculinity that's out there.
All right. Well, I hope he reads Ruth Whitman's book and Richard Reeves' work, as we all should, both Boy Mom by Ruth Whitman and Of Boys and Men by Richard Reeves are two must-read books for the parents of any boys, or for all boys and men to understand as well. I really have learned so much from both those authors, and I hope that Doug Emhoff gets those books. And finally, I guess I have to play this audio of RFK Jr. answering a question as how a 6-month-old female bear cub was found dead in New York City's Central Park almost a decade ago. Guess what? It was him. He admitted he was responsible for staging the scene of a dead bear cub in the massive Central Park after he found the bear on the road in upstate New York. He says that in the video, he saw a woman hit the animal with her van, and he threw it in his car. This is just insane. This brain-wormed, conspiracy theory-ridden guy who's running for president, and this can't help him, right? It can't help him, huh? Where are RFK Jr. supporters? We don't have any. And if you already heard this and don't want to hear it again, it's about 3 minutes and 20 seconds, and it ends at about the 25-minute mark here in the podcast. But here it is, RFK talking to Roseanne.
I was taking a group of people falconing up in Goshen, New York, up in the Hudson Valley. And I was supposed to meet them there at like maybe 8 or 9. I was driving up maybe, really early, like 7. And that woman in a van in front of me hit a bear and killed it, a young bear. So I pulled over and I picked up the bear and put him in the back of my van because I was going to skin the bear. And it was very good condition. And I was going to put the meat in my refrigerator. And you can do that in New York State. You can get a bear tag for a roadkill bear. And so then we went hawking, and I had the bear in my car. And then we had a really good day, and we went late. We were catching a lot of game, and the people really loved it, so we stayed late. And instead of going back to my home in Westchester, I had to go right to the city because there was a dinner at Peter Luger's Steakhouse. And at the end of the dinner, it went late, and I realized I couldn't go home. I had to go to the airport. And the bear was in my car, and I didn't want to leave the bear in the car because that would have been bad. So then I thought, at that time, this was a little bit of the redneck in me. There'd been a series of bicycle accidents in New York. They had just put in the bike lanes. And a couple of people had gotten killed, and it was every day, and people had gotten badly injured. Every day it was in the press. And so I thought, I wasn't drinking, of course, but people were drinking with me who thought this was a good idea. And I said, I had an old bike in my car that somebody had asked me to get rid of it. I said, let's go put the bear in Central Park and we'll make it look like he got hit by a bike. It'll be funny for people. So everybody thought that's a great idea. So we went and did that, and we thought it would be amusing for whoever found it or something. The next day, it was like, it was on every television station. It was the front page of every paper, and I turned on the TV, and there was like a mile of yellow tape, and there were 20 cop cars. There were helicopters flying over it. And I was like, oh my God, what did I do? And then there were some people on TV in tie-back suits with gloves on lifting up the bike, and they were saying they're going to take this up to Albany to get it fingerprinted. And I was worried because my prints were all over that bike. Luckily, the story died down after a while, and it stayed dead for a decade. And the New Yorker somehow found out about it, and they're going to do a big article on me, and that's one of the articles. So they asked me, the fact checker said, it's going to be a bad story. Right?
I think it's a great story.
So apparently RFK Jr. shared that video and is like, good luck trying to spin this, New Yorker. He said, look forward to seeing how you spin this, New Yorker. Really? There's no spin needed, you fucking lunatic. Somehow you thought if you shared a video of you talking to another lunatic, Roseanne, that this would be settled? Even she was shocked. Now that all of your brains are broken, I think everybody should know that I once left a dead toucan in Riverside Park in New York City next to a pistol. I think everybody should also know that when I was in Australia last year, I found a dead kangaroo. I put it in my suitcase, brought it back, and left it in Central Park next to a pogo stick. And it feels good to finally admit that to you guys. All right, those are your headlines, and those are your sound bites for today's show. I hope you appreciated it. Put a lot of work into that, as I do each and every day. Can't do it without your support. And so tell your friends. Spread the word about this daily news and analysis podcast. Nobody does it better than us here at Stand Up. By us, I mean me. Sorry, I suck at promoting myself. And thank you, Ryan G., for his very, very nice email that he said that he was traveling all week, getting on one plane to a boat to a plane, running around. He said it was a real flurry of travel, and he was super excited to get a Friday news recap on his phone on Friday. He said it's great to sign off the crazy media ride for a few days, but it's equally great to get all caught up while I push through my morning routine. Ryan G., you are the best. I appreciate that. You appreciate that I did the news update on Friday, where I also did the hangout on Thursday night and got it done. I'll be thinking of you as I do every news update because I know how much you appreciate them, and I appreciate you and all of you. So thank you very much. Now let's get to my conversation with my very special guest and good friend, longtime friend, Andrew Spar, who I met through The Old Show. He was a listener of The Old Show and Sirius XM. We became good friends when I found out that he's one of the smartest, most effective communicators I've ever met in my life. He's an educator. He's the president of the Florida Education Association, the state's largest association of professional employees, biggest union in the state. He's also served in the executive board of the Florida AFL-CIO and was secretary-treasurer of that organization from January to 2016 to 2020. Andrew is just an amazing leader. He's a really great guy. He's a very good friend of mine, and I'll be headed down there at the end of September for their annual event. Really looking forward to being in Orlando. If you are around, come on out. But it was great catching up with Andrew Spar on Friday afternoon. Talk about what the hell is happening in Florida and around the country. He's just one of my favorite people, and so let's do it right now. Oh, yes, there he is. Andrew Spar, welcome back. Always great to see you and hear from you. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, Pete. Always great to be here. Good seeing you as well.
And I want to see you at the end of September. Tell everybody about this important event and that you're hosting down there in Florida.
Yeah, so it's our annual convention, and Pete, you've been down before, but this year we're going to do what we call a power panel, and we're going to have some national labor leaders. We're still working on all, but certainly Randy Weingarten from the AFT, Becky Pringle from the NEA, Fred Redmond from the national AFL-CIO, and at least one other national leader we're still working to secure. And we're going to talk about how the labor movement builds power, especially in Florida, in a state where we have been under attack and there's been every attempt to silence the voice of workers in the state.
That's going to be awesome. I'm really excited to
say, Pete, you're going to be moderating it.
Yeah, it's just weird that you're calling something a power panel and I'm involved with it because I'm not. What I bring to the table is I'm going to open on imposter syndrome and why it's okay to have as I'm looking at these actually powerful union leaders. I'm honored to be there. I'm looking forward to it. When you use that word, by the way, you're steeped in the language of labor and organizing. Just unpack that for a second, because it's not just a flashy word. It's actually a thing. And when we're talking about power and who has it and who doesn't, it's always a struggle and always probably will be, right? So what do you mean when you say power when it comes to organizing and unions?
So people smarter than me talk about power a lot. And my takeaway from a lot of these smart individuals when we think about power, and I've been talking about this quite honestly as I've been traveling the state, the school year is about to start, and that is there are three different types of power. There is power that's driven by money, right? People, the billionaires out there, right? The Bill Gates, the Betsy DeVosses, the Koch brothers. These are people who have money and use their money.
And obviously lobbyists that work for industries, and that's always going to be a lot of more money in this industry than maybe that one or that industry that's more considering of people. Go ahead.
Yep. And then you have people who are in position. They have positional power. Your governors, the president, right? The state lawmakers. In education, we talk about superintendents, principals, school boards, right? They all have positional power. And these are people who can create influence based on passing policies or enforcing policies or passing laws, right? And very often what we should not forget about is the people with the money power buy the people with positional power to get what they want. Like those two individuals, they work close together, right? Yeah. Then you have people power. And if you look at our history, people power always overcomes the positional and money power if we organize. And so that's what we've been talking a lot about, and why I wanted to do this panel, quite honestly, is this idea that we can build power if the people come together and organize. And we've seen it. We've seen it recently in what UAW did with the auto workers, right? And the big three. We've seen it with Starbucks workers, with Amazon workers. You're seeing people coming together saying, I'm done with the fact that policymakers and those in power and those with the money are ignoring me, and we've got to do something about it. And so that's where we are in Florida too. And I think more and more throughout the nation, we've got to leverage the people power to overcome some of these elected officials, sometimes regardless of political party, who just don't listen to us.
That's a really hard thing to do, leveraging people power. First, you have to inform them about what's going on. There's a thing going on. Then you have to inform them on why it's good or bad for them. That's hard to do, communication, and we're just so cluttered with everything now. But then you have to deal with the obstacles. And in Florida, you know this better than anybody, how hard it is to get people together and create and take power, because Republican governments, let's just say it, and leaders have passed laws in states like Florida that make it so much harder to do exactly what you described needs to be done. So every time you think you're going to be able to get more members and organize and give them what they need to advocate for them, better benefits and everything else, they make it harder for you to do that. Explain a little bit of the history and where you're at with those obstacles and what they are in a right not to work state.
Yeah, so Florida has always been a right to work for less state is how I frame it. And so people make less money here because they make it harder for us to organize in a union and build the kind of people power you need to overcome all of the obstacles that are in our way. Last year, a little over a year ago, the governor implemented a new legislation that he wanted to get, which, by the way, was funded by big money, by billionaires who fund an organization called the Freedom Foundation. And they spent millions of dollars in Florida to get this legislation passed. And so they passed this legislation that took away our right as educators, as public employees, to freely choose to have our union dues deducted from our paycheck. The safest, most secure, easiest way to pay our union dues. They blocked that. And so we had to switch up, go to a different system. They also made it harder by saying you have to achieve a threshold of at least 60%, or you have to jump through a bunch of hoops requiring people to vote that they want to keep their union. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. And then the other thing they said was that we have to fill out a state mandated government membership authorization form, a membership form for the government, sole purpose for the government, which essentially is like registering that I'm a union member in the state of Florida and want to be a union member. Like, you don't have to register for the NRA in the state of Florida. You don't have to register for the Sierra Club, but you do have to register if you want to be a member of a union, essentially.
Crazy.
So it is. And so the governor signed that, and I said this at the time he signed it. He thought he was signing our death warrant, and we were going to prove him wrong. And let me tell you, we did. We are a year into this. We are not back to where we were when this started, but we're really darn close. We blew everyone away. Even people within the union movement who've gone through this before, who said it's going to take you years to get back to where you were. In 1 year, we are almost back to where we are.
Congratulations. And I'm sure that has to do a lot with your leadership and the many others in leadership there that are doing such great work. And I've met most of them, and they're amazing people. But how did you do it?
We did it by organizing. by building power. And what we found is what we expected, right? Was that educators and public employees in the state, they want to have a union and they want a union contract. And that's what has motivated people. Look, here's what we did. We're back to almost where we were. We haven't had all our locals get to 60% that's required to avoid these elections. We have over 100 of our locals that have submitted to have an election. There's only been 8 done so far. This started back last year, right? So in a year, they've only done 8 because the state can't keep up with it. And of the 8 they've done, we're 8-0, with over 96% of those voting to keep their union, right? That's the average of this. So there's no doubt that this didn't work. The governor is so pissed off that his plan failed. He actually held a press conference back in June before he signed the budget and spent an hour bashing educators and their union in the state of Florida because we're still here and we're still pointing out how poorly he treats public education in the state of Florida, students in the state of Florida, teachers in the state of Florida. And he doesn't like it. But we're going to continue to do that because we're here. And I will tell you, they keep changing the rules on us too, by the way. In fact, there's this commission. It's all appointed by the governor, Public Employees Relation Commission, appointed by the governor. He had appointed a chair. He didn't like what the chair was doing, so he removed the chair and appointed another one because they weren't killing us. And now this one isn't able to kill us. You know what the governor forgets, Pete? And a lot of people know this, but the governor clearly doesn't. Educators are problem solvers. Educators problem solve 1,000 times a day. So no matter how many problems the governor throws at us in Florida, we're going to problem solve and we're going to figure out a way around it. And we're going to be stronger for it. And our goal this year is going to be larger than we were when this all started. That's our goal this year.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Congratulations on that. When we were talking the other day, you said basically, if you want to know what it's like to live in America post Project 2025, ask us here in Florida. We're basically in it. And I don't understand what you mean. When I wanted to talk to you, I knew I wanted to ask you, what would Project 2025 do to education? It touches every element of our society and everything that government touches and more. And I haven't taken a look at it in terms of the education effects. But you're saying you're basically living what it will be like for the rest of us in Florida? Why?
Yeah, so if you look at Project 2025, look, it's 900 pages long, Pete. I haven't read it. I don't know how many people actually have read it, but it's by the Heritage Foundation, for those who don't know. And a lot of the people who wrote it were people who were part of Donald Trump's administration. So as many times as Donald Trump says he has no idea what we're talking about, folks, don't be fooled by that, right? So education part I read, and the education part talks about universal vouchers. We have universal vouchers in Florida. It was passed a little over a year and a half ago, I guess now, or 2 years ago. And so we have universal vouchers in Florida, and that means anyone can get vouchers. So let me give you a real example as to what happened. Last year was the first year they implemented universal vouchers. And last school year, of the $2.1 billion or $2.3 billion new dollars allocated for education, $1.1 billion went right out the door to vouchers. So half of the new money allocated for public schools went out the door to vouchers. Who did it go to? It went to, almost all of it went to families who already were either homeschooling their kid or had their kids enrolled in private schools who were from affluent communities. That's who the money went to. And what does that mean? Well, let's talk about the homeschool example for a minute. In Florida, under these new rules, someone who's homeschooling their kid can buy annual passes to Disney World and call it an educational expense and have taxpayers pay for their annual passes to Disney World. They can buy a large screen TV, call it an educational expense, and taxpayers are paying for it. And there is zero accountability. So literally the public schools are losing money, now talking about closing schools. We have school districts in Florida who are talking about closing schools because they don't have enough money to operate them. And these aren't schools that are struggling. These are schools. One school they're talking about closing in Jacksonville is a bilingual school. It is an A-rated school. They had the highest test scores in the state. It is a small school. They have about 300 students there, and they're talking about shutting it down because they don't have the money. And the commissioner of education in Florida, when we talked about shutting down schools, he said that's how it's supposed to work. We're supposed to shut down schools. That's Project 2025. They want to shut down public schools.
And furthermore, I'm looking at a really great coverage of it from the Hechinger report that talks about more about Project 2025. You know all this, but what they would do to Head Start and childcare, where they would eliminate Head Start, home-based childcare, on-site childcare, what they would do to that, K through 12 education, and the data collection that they would be doing is really scary. Rolling back regulations and protections for LGBTQ students. And then, of course, as you mentioned and touched on, privatization that they want to obviously destroy, basically what you just illustrated, school meals, special education, teaching about, and obviously what would be taught, teaching about race and history, banning books, and I could go on and on for what Project 2025 has in store for educators and public education in general. But you've just illustrated, of course, the voucher issue, and we're just starting.
Yeah, the voucher issue. And look, you talked about special education funding. So students with special needs. And in Florida, students with special needs do not get the resources and support they need because Florida does not prioritize helping kids with special needs. They do it on the cheap. And that's what worries people, right? When you talk about eliminating federal funds, you're talking about those programs. You're talking about Title IX programs. You're talking about programs for our at-risk communities, our poorer communities, Title I. So those are all programs that are at risk. And you mentioned pre-K. Yeah, Head Start would be gone under their program, which gets kids from poor communities ready for school. And if there's one thing we know about kids who live in poverty, they don't do as well in school because they don't have that solid foundation.
There's a tremendous amount of data on pre-K and what it determines for outcomes across every zip code in America upon graduation from high school. There's this correlation that seems bulletproof about if a student got pre-K. And I don't understand cognitively or how that necessarily works, but the statistic is bulletproof about how much better you end up in life in terms of your success. You want to fight poverty? Fund universal pre-K. Like, Andrew, it's my understanding, every other civilized country in the world, I believe, has that.
Yeah, look, we know that the key here is brain development. And there's been a lot of research on brain development. And what's so important for kids from the time they're born to the time they enter school, that's one of the most pivotal points in their life. If they're not being read to, if they're not being exposed to a world of language and opportunities and experiences, their brain isn't developing the way that it needs to really strengthen and encourage growth. And it's the same thing with music. Music should be part of every childhood, every day. So should physical education, because those are things that stimulate and spur the brain development. And it's so important to the success of children.
In my case, it's when my parents concentrated most of their drinking during that time of my life, I think. I'm kidding them. They didn't even drink. I just thought that would be funny. It matters so much.
They dropped you on your head. That's all.
I don't think they dropped. I think they were none of that. But it's just such an important time. And everybody knows that if you want to invest in America, and if you're a true capitalist that wants America to be the greatest in the world, would invest in pre-K so that every young person, because we're talking about when they graduate, would have so much more opportunity and be so much smarter in so many different ways because of how important that education is, crucially. So there's so much more to talk about with Project 2025. Nonetheless, it's no good. Is there anything else you want to say about it?
Yeah, listen, the other big issue on Project 25, when we open talking about the union stuff, that's the other thing, right? Project 2025 in labor, they want to do away with overtime. They want to do away with a lot of these job rules that we put in place that unions have gotten over the time. And they want to make it illegal for any public employee in the nation to be part of a union. They literally want to take away the rights of workers. And I got to tell you, when that happens, there is no middle class, right? Let's be clear. President Biden said it, and he's 100% right. Unions built the middle class. There was a time, and it's back. It's back. But there was a time in this country where people would go around saying, I have a union job, which meant I could have a house. I could feed my kids. I could make sure they could get to the doctor. I could make sure they could participate in sports, and I could go on vacation. And more importantly, as importantly, I could retire.
Retire. What's that? Retirement.
Yeah, right. And so that was they attacked that for years. And now that they've seen this resurgence, Project 2025 is about returning that back. Like, they don't want workers to have those rights because they don't want a middle class. They want the haves and the have-nots.
Super important, very important element of it. Yeah, what it would do to labor. I got to ask you about Florida politics and the change and of course, what you've seen. I should ask you this. You were at the national what was it called? Gathering, AFT, American Federation of Teachers in Dallas, was it? Houston. I get them mixed up. Sorry, Texas. You were there when Kamala Harris was speaking, just after she basically was, all of this happened. It was one of, I think, her first big speeches. You, AF, one of the, I think the first big union to endorse her. She made a speech. You were with her. I should have opened our conversation with this. Tell me about your conversation with Kamala Harris, if you want to. You don't have to if it's personal.
Look, I think, first of all, I think she's an amazing leader. We were in Houston for our convention, and Randy Weingarten, president of AFT, she called us all together right away, and we moved things around to make sure that we could move to endorse Kamala Harris for president. And so she came, and it was great because the excitement in the room was something I haven't seen in a long time. We all love President Biden because President Biden has been the best president for unions, I would argue, in the history of the United States. Wow. And he's been certainly one of the best presidents for public education in the United States that we've ever had. And we all were, disappointed when we heard he wasn't going to run. But the excitement around Vice President Harris was amazing. It was electric. And I did get a chance to talk to her. And as I often do, I talked to her about who I am. And as a white Jewish guy married to an African-American female who is an AKA, and my daughter went to Howard University, which is very similar to a lot of the story that the vice president has. And of course, she said, I remember you. I knew you looked familiar. The other two times I've met her was during COVID and we had masks on. But she's just very down to earth. And she talked about Florida. And what was really cool, I thought, was she said, we're turning Florida around. And she's right. And I got to tell you, what's been happening, people keep saying Florida has gone red, Florida has gone red. Look, Florida, there are more Republicans registered in Florida than Democrats now, but don't lose sight of the fact that's because they pulled a lot of Democrats off the voter rolls. Florida has purged the voter rolls, and they've taken off what they've identified as inactive voters. And so there are a lot of people who may go vote and all of a sudden be told, oh, you're listed as an inactive voter, and they're going to have to go through a process to get their vote to count. But there's also, obviously, as in any state, when they redistrict and they gerrymander and they do all of those kinds of things. But here's what I always say. Republican or Democrat or no party affiliation, voters in Florida want strong public schools. They want teachers to be treated with respect. They want teachers and staff to be paid more, and they want kids to get the education they deserve and need. And the problem we keep running into is the people in power are ignoring the voters, and we shouldn't lose sight of that either. But I don't know that Vice President Harris will win Florida, but I think Florida is going to be a lot more competitive than anyone thought, and I wouldn't rule it out.
Oh. Interesting. Ender Spar says, I wouldn't rule it out. How much of it do you think has to do with these ballot referendums, these referendums on the ballot? I think there's marijuana is abortion as well.
Yeah, there's three I'll talk about real quick. One, I hope goes down, which is they want to make school board elections partisan. And in Florida, school board elections are nonpartisan elections. The governor and his group want partisan elections. It's not polling. I will tell you, I don't see that passing. It's polling at like 38, 40%. It needs 60% to pass. The other two that are really big is the marijuana, which is Amendment 3. Amendment 3 would legalize recreational marijuana. It's polling at between 63 and 65%. It needs 60% to pass. I will tell you, the best ads I've ever seen are the people doing their ads. I want to know who's doing their ads because they're phenomenal. They bust it's not people like you using marijuana. They have grandmas on there, right? They have old ladies, old white ladies to be more specific, who are talking about why we should have legalization of marijuana in Florida. They have affluent families. It's amazing the ads that they're doing. But again, the governor has been beating that one up and the needle hasn't moved. It's like rock solid between 63 and 65%. And then the abortion issue, it's on the ballot as well. It's been polling between 63 and 65%. And there's not been a lot of money spent on either side on that yet. So we'll see. But most poll people I talk to, most pollsters I talk to, are saying that they don't see that moving much either. And I think with Kamala on the ballot now, that might actually even more solidify those two issues because there is excitement. My own daughter, my oldest daughter, will vote in her first presidential election.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, vote in her first presidential election. She's 20 years old. She'll be 21 in September. And so her first presidential election, and she says everywhere she sees on social media, it's all about, in her circles, in the young people's circles, not our circles, Pete, but the young people's circles, it's all about Kamala Harris. And
yet your daughter is supporting Trump because she's big into crypto. That's surprising.
Not at all. She would not. She couldn't believe the conversation. I told her about the conversation.
Don't play that. Don't let her know I made that joke. Please don't let her know I made that joke. She will not be happy with me.
And listen, when I told her what was said that Trump said at the Black Journalist Convention the other day, she didn't believe me at first. And then she heard it. She said, he did not say that. And I'm like, listen to it. She could not believe it.
And what did she say? Reminding people that your daughters are Black. What did she say?
Yeah, what my daughter said when she heard that was, she said, I can't believe he said that. She was just shocked.
Yeah.
She's like, there's something wrong with him. Why would he go to the Black Journalist Organization and say Kamala Harris isn't Black?
Yeah, it's like what I'm hearing her say is, A, I'm shocked, which is crazy that we're still shocked, but B, she's saying to herself, the reason I'm shocked is because why would any person think that's an okay thing?
Correct.
That's the normal reaction. Why would you think that would be an okay, appropriate, welcome, good, anything to say? People can't wrap their heads around why you would do it. And I think it's because he's so weird.
And I want to point one other thing out about Florida. If you look at the last 2 election cycles in Florida, it's been the African-American vote that really hasn't come out. 2 years ago in the governor's election, Democrats stayed home, and it was the largest segment that stayed home was African-American females. That's not going to be the case this time. And so that's why I think Florida is going to be a lot closer than people expect. And we haven't seen a lot of polling yet.
Why do you dig into that a little bit? It's not going to be the case this time because what has transpired? Certainly the only thing that comes to my mind is the initiatives that Ron DeSantis has done around not teaching African-American history in, I think, colleges and trying to get that out of public school. Is there a specific issue or is there more organizing? What's the difference for Black female voters in Florida this time around?
It's hope. Right. So you get, when you see something crazy, right. When you see something crazy happening, you get angry.
Yeah.
And anger goes so far, but you also sometimes have hopelessness. And in Florida, for a lot of people who want to see the right thing done around public education, around families, around workers, they've lost a lot of hope because we've been beaten back so many times. And what I always say, one of my jobs is to help build hope and show people that there is a way to do something. And I think with Kamala Harris on the ticket, and it's not just her being the presidential candidate, it's also her message. If you listen to what she's talking about a better America. She's talking about a better life for everyone. She's talking about making more money, taking care of your health, having respect, bringing back that decorum of respect. And I think when you think about someone said this, it's not me. I heard this on a talk show host was talking about this, or a group of African-American women. And they were saying at the end of the day, what African-American women look at is family. They look at personal economics, and they look at faith. And when they see Kamala Harris, that's what they see. And therefore they can connect to it and relate to it. And I think that's true not just for African-American women, quite honestly. I think that's true for people who will see past the politics and more towards what do we want as Americans and what do we want in our country. And I think when you listen to what Kamala Harris is saying on the stump speech, she's talking about issues. And when you hear Donald Trump and the others, they're talking about division. And there's a big difference.
Fascinating. Great answer. It's hope. I love it. All right. Did I miss anything? Anything else we wanted to discuss? I always want your views on pretty much everything.
Yeah, no, look, the school year is starting. Everyone, even if it's going to be starting now or soon. And I'm just going to say summer is over. I don't know how that happened, but I think this will be the summer to remember, won't it?
Yeah, for sure. And let's be clear. You're talking about school starting in Florida. We have another month until school starts in New York, because you grew up here.
Yeah, I grew up in New York. Yeah, but it starts after Labor Day. But trust me, it's going to be here before you know it.
Yeah, but to be fair, in Florida and plenty of other places around the country, school is starting very soon.
We have teachers who've started in Florida yesterday on the 1st, and some starting on Monday, and then kids come back a week from Monday. So
I can't wait to see you in a few weeks in Orlando. And if listeners, last time I was down there with you, a few listeners came out and joined us. So maybe we probably won't have time, but if we do, we'd love to see folks. Maybe we can have a drink somewhere in Orlando, September 21st and 2nd. Is that it?
20th and 21st. Yeah.
20th and 21st in Orlando. All right, bud. Thank you so much for joining me as always. So good.
Absolutely. Take care, Pete.
Well, there you go. Andrew Spar, everybody. FEAWEB.org is the Florida Educational Association website, and you can tweet Andrew Spar and let him know that you heard him here on the show. That would mean a lot to me. He's very active on Twitter and social media, as you have to be. He's at Andrew Spar, FEA. Go say hello to him. And that is today's show. I will be back here, of course, tomorrow and all week with great guests, with great news updates, and everything else. I can't do it without you. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. Thank you, my bumblebees, for listening all the way to the end. John Carroll, take us away.
That's the time you gotta finally get up on your knees. When you can't see the forest for the burning trees, you got to stand up. Hey, you've been sitting so long, you got the creaky knees, you got to stand up. Stand up. I think you're driving wheels with leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. We got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. Let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. And even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up. Stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up. They had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of a stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. Alright, we got to speak up, we got to reach up, and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand